Hello, elevator community. Welcome to the Elevator Entrepreneur Podcast. My mission is to empower my fellow elevator entrepreneurs in creating your growth plan, which is going to free your time, allowing you to rest easy. I'm your host, Sean Madden. I've had an amazing 35 years in the elevator industry, starting out in the field, managed several elevator companies, started, built, and sold Madden Elevator Company for well over market value, and serving as your NAC president. I've done a lot in the industry, and now I'm ready to pay my knowledge forward. Let's dive right in. Welcome to the Elevator Entrepreneur Show. I'm excited to be here with Miss Anita Seymour of Expert Service Solutions. Anita's joining us from California, I believe. Anita, welcome.
Thank you, Sean. It's an honor to be here. Yeah, I'm joining from San Diego.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you here. We were talking a little bit earlier. Tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got in the elevator industry, and what brought you to where you are today.
Well, I started about 20 years ago. Feels like a very long time. I was doing some consulting work, helping companies, elevator contractors, get on an ERP system at the time. So I came in contact with quite a few companies and met the love of my life and got pregnant. And it was becoming very difficult for me to travel. So I was starting to brainstorm, see what I can do on my own. Decided to come up with a mobile app. And
Nice.
probably back in those days, you just had the Windows Mobile, slide out keyboards with a little stylus. That was my first device that I developed on. And it was still fairly new for the industry. I don't think companies were ready for it. A lot of the mechanics, they had the Next telephone. I don't know if you remember those, the walkie-talkie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Blackberries came later. So it was fairly new. I think probably ahead of my time for the industry. I think slowly, like after coming to the NAC conventions, people started becoming familiar and they started opening up. The first year, like they wouldn't even stop by the booth. It's like, oh, no. We don't even want to hear about it. And then the second year, I had few companies come up. And then the third year, very exciting to see this transition because iOS and Android came out with their smartphones. And so that kind of really changed the industry. A lot of these mechanics were, I wouldn't say mechanics right at that point, but it was more the salespeople, the upper management had those devices in their heads, and they probably saw the potential of what that can do for their company. Still couldn't figure out how it was going to work out, but there was a little interest there. And then by the fourth year, it was like, show me what you got. We want to see what you got. I had some really great companies who took the leap with me, and that just, I don't know, exploded. I was a one-woman show. I developed the app. You actually came to my booth back in those days too and did the support, the training. I was everything at that point. Then once we got to that point, I really needed to start hiring people, which I did. And that's probably, I'll get into how difficult that was. And slowly, I think we had some major companies, independents that came on board and they led the path for other companies. Like if they can do it, this is possible. And then, of course, with the iOS and the Android, mechanics were using those smartphones, which only made sense to get some productivity app on their device. So gave them a paperless solution. They had visibility to their mechanics out in the field, which before they didn't. Everything was done by paper. So really changed the industry at that point. And then I think I'm always looking for a good challenge on the next challenge. And I think you had a part to play in this too, is like, why don't you develop the backend application? Like, why just focus on the mobile app? And I said, yeah, like I got this down pat. And sure enough, we came out with, I would say the first iteration of our ERP system would just focus on the operation side. And slowly, we just kept adding modules over time because customers would come up and say, well, can you do this? Can you do the billing? Can you manage the maintenance contracts, the construction side of business? And organically developed into an ERP system, which is what it is today. The other thing I wanted to mention is this industry is pretty unique, given that I was a mom, and trying to stay home and trying to manage both career as well as my home life. And it really allowed me to do that. And it just allowed me to be myself, I guess. And when you're happy, when you're the happiest in what you're doing, I think you thrive in that environment. And really the elevator industry provided that for me. So yeah.
It's interesting. I didn't realize it was 20 years ago, I guess, when we were still doing paper tickets. And It's pretty amazing that you were one of the instrumental people that brought technology to the elevator industry from the field standpoint. The industry has always been very slow to adopt new technologies. It's just hard for me to believe it's been 20 years and you don't even look like you could have started doing that 20 years ago. You look like you're 20. So,
Thanks for the filter. Yeah. I think the other thing that really attracted me to this industry was how family oriented it was. Like, it was always my dream to bring in my brother and my sister into the business. And I saw that all around me. Like, all my customers, were family owned businesses. And I'm like, wow, I envied that and I wanted that. And it was so neat to eventually have that for myself as well. It was very accepting.
that's awesome. Well, great story. Appreciate the insights. It's great to hear success and you starting from 20 years ago and growing into a full ERP system today. So I'm sure that you've had a ton of challenges as that unfolded throughout the years. Why don't you tell us about one of the biggest challenges you had and maybe some of the stuff you did or tried to do to solve it?
Yeah, I think my biggest challenge, and I'm sure a lot of companies can relate to this, is building a team. It's one thing when you're that one person, then you can do it all, and then you grow so fast that you need to rely on other people. And finding people that's going to fit the culture is probably the biggest challenge. It has to be a give and take relationship. You can't just say, well, it's beneficial for me to have this employee, but then you have to look at it from their perspective too. Like, why would they want to stay with you? Like, what's so attractive to be working with your company? So lots of interviews, lots of trial and error. Somebody would look really good on paper. They're really great in interviews, but then when it comes to getting the work done, it's like, oh no,
Hmm.
they don't know as much as we thought they did. To avoid going through that process, there was a couple of things that we did. We did an aptitude test. So we would have a really extensive test for the developers, the DevOps, the QA team, and then they had to
Yeah.
answer these questions. And if they didn't get a certain percentage, it was like, they could look amazing on paper, but we were not even going to go there. So that aptitude test had to demonstrate their skill set. So that was one thing. And it took some time because it takes time to figure out what those questions should be. You're looking for expertise within those domains. And being the person that kind of did it all, you're not an expert at everything. So you have to find the right people. So I think another thing that we did was hire a phenomenal HR person. It's all about people. It's all about connection and hiring that person that could be the boots on the ground that somebody can go to and talk about their feelings or whatever it is. Like, it's just approachable. It's amazing how employees don't always come to the owners or upper management. They feel there's always that distance. But if you find that middle person, that middle layer that they can go to, I think makes a significant difference as well. And the third thing, which I think was the most effective when it came to retaining employees, is coming up with a career path. So if you can demonstrate to that employee, yes, you're starting here, but here's your career path to get to the next level, you have to have these 10 things, whether it's courses that you need to take or master the product or get to the point where they're demonstrating that, yes, they've mastered that position. So now they can move up to the next position. And it really helps when it comes to employee performances, when you have annual performances, when you have that interaction with them to say, okay, well, everybody wants a promotion, everyone wants a pay hike, but
Right.
did you meet these criteria? And it creates a
Yeah.
process and eliminates where employees feel like, oh, I didn't get what I deserved, or maybe the employer feels like, okay, am I supposed to be giving this? It's laid out.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what the expectations are.
I want to go back a little bit to talking about the hiring process. I remember, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I remember a situation a handful of years ago where you woke up one day and you were like a bunch of people down and you had to go figure that out very quickly. So, can you talk a little bit about that challenge? I just remember that one.
Yeah, and obviously we overcame that, but it didn't happen overnight. I want to say one of the best things that I've been fortunate with is I have amazing customers, or I have the option to work with a customer, or not to work with a customer. Like, you're building that partnership, that relationship with your customers as well. And at some point, every company goes through that with your customers and say, hey, look, I'm going through this right now. I'm going to just ask for your patience. You'd be amazed
Yeah.
how your customers will appreciate that. And then they will support you in that as well. So I think that's part of how I overcame that. Also, taking those right steps. Like, how can we
Yeah.
avoid these mistakes in hiring? What can we do to improve that process? So by that time, like, my brother was with the company. My sister has amazing experience as well. So it really helped to come together and come up with a plan, an action plan for that. It's also like, how are you going to fix whatever is happening? Are you going to be able to make up for it? Like, don't over promise and under deliver. I think that's something
Yeah.
I also had to personally learn myself. It was a journey where, oh yeah, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. And then you realize, well, no, I don't have the time to do everything. So what's the one that's going to add the biggest value for your customers?
No, that's great insights. It's interesting because what I've seen in independent elevator companies, and you can let me know what you've seen, oftentimes they don't put HR people in place. They feel like they can handle it. They feel like they got supervisors and managers. And it seems like HR is a back burner idea. But to your point, it's one of the most important jobs and a resource to help business owners by not having to be the person that has to deal with all that stuff and having somebody take that pressure off. When I finally got down the path of hiring, I ended up hiring an outside HR person, not a full time in house person, but I could have conversations with them about my struggles, my frustrations, my employees, and they could go around the backside and work through those things without the emotional connection that sometimes is hard to push through. So, talk a little bit about that scenario.
Yes, I would get very desperate at times, and I hate to even admit this, but when you got 10 projects going on and you want to deliver this and you can't find the right people, like, oh my gosh, we just need to hire someone today. Like, we need to get this going. So that would be my anxiety and my stress talking. And then our HR person would be like, Anita, it's going to cost us more, make the wrong hire. We spend all of our
Mhm.
time training, and all those things are obvious, but you nailed it. Your emotions are taking over. So to have somebody handle that part, you need to have full trust in that company or individual. I really had to hold my tongue at times because I was able to trust this individual, and she definitely delivered. If I look back and I'm like, oh, thank God, because I would have been hiring, firing, hiring, firing
Mhm.
on a whim, and
Yeah.
that's not good. That's not good for your company's culture either. I've been guilty of that too, where I didn't add a lot of value to HR. I would be like, oh yeah, we can do the interviews. And then it just became a full-time job for me. And I'm like wasting my time. Like, a
Right.
good HR company or person will have a process that they know works for them, and they're the expert in that domain. And so at some point, you have to appreciate that and say, I'm not going to be able to go through those steps. This person has it down packed, and I'm just going to let them do their job because they're
Yeah.
amazing at it. And so I'm learning something new every day.
You talked a little bit earlier about independent elevator business owners and family businesses. And my experience there and seeing this as well in other companies is often exactly what you said. There's a scenario that happens and you need somebody, and you can trust your cousin, niece, nephew, aunt, uncle, brother, whatever, right? So you're like, hey, what do you think about coming to do this job? And they come and do the job and like, okay, go do it. I can trust you. I don't have to worry about it. But oftentimes, I think what's missed there is having clear understanding, clear expectations. And you hit the nail on the head earlier when you talked about the hiring process should be a process. Then having the HR person to work with the employees, even if they're family members, in building out their plan. You're coming in to do X, but how do you get to Y and Z? How do you put together a plan that helps them get where they want to go in the business? I think that's instrumental and great advice because we tried to do a lot of that and sometimes we didn't do a great job of it. But every time we did a good job of it, you can always tell, is the employee moving in the direction that you need them to move? And if you're a growing company, you need employees to learn and grow.
Absolutely. Oh, another thing that reminds me is we put a lot of emphasis on education. If you're educating yourself, and demonstrating the courses that you would sign up for, we pay for those courses. Whatever you're learning, how can you implement that into your day-to-day tasks? And so that was huge too, because the employees really felt like, oh, wow, this is an opportunity for me to grow. And for us, it was like, okay, great. The employees are not stagnant. You're not limited to their skill set. They're also learning and bringing all these new ideas, which has been amazing. I think the biggest success rate that we've seen with this program is our DevOps team. We just see them trying different things and they're taking these courses. And you'll see on our LinkedIn, like, so and so took this course. And then next day, they're like, oh, I want to try this. And you have to give them some autonomy to grow and try different things. It could be trial and error, but it's amazing some of the things that come out of that, just the freedom to explore.
That's a great advice too. So like you're giving them a little bit of flexibility. You give them some tools and let them go figure out what they want to learn or what they think they need to learn. I'm going to make a little plug for NAC. Like one of the things I loved about NAC is they developed that vertical transportation management program, which is VTMP.
Yeah.
And I went through that program myself, and there's a lot of great insights in there. It's a little more rigid, but the cool thing is some of our employees, I gave them raises every time they passed one of the courses. And so it was just small raises, but they knew what their plan was and how they can grow to the next level. And they're going to have more education, so they'll be worth more money. And we built a plan for them to do that. And some of them took off and ran and did it, and other ones didn't even touch it. And then they come back a year later, like, I need a raise. Like, you didn't do anything we talked about.
Right. And that's it. Like you can go back and say that to them. But if you
Yeah.
don't have something in place, it's hard to measure too. We're humans. We forget. We remember the bad things. We sometimes forget the good things. If you don't have a good documentation process and then you're doing those reviews, you're like, I remember that one bad thing that you did and it really hurt us. Well, what about the other 10 things that I did? Like, oh yeah.
Well, we could sit here and talk all day, but we probably should close this down. Why don't you tell our fellow elevator entrepreneurs one really good piece of advice or several pieces of advice, whatever you'd like. What's some good golden nuggets that you would give to a new or upcoming entrepreneur in our industry?
I think I'm going to speak for myself. The one thing that really gets me going is challenging yourself. Like, don't be afraid to challenge yourself. That's when, you're going to grow and see that growth within you. I think it's important. Don't be afraid for failures too, as you're trying to challenge yourself. Because if everything was easy, we'd all be doing it. So I think that's one thing. And then probably the other thing is have fun, be yourself. That's important too. If you enjoy what you're doing, I think you're going to be really good at it. So yeah, those two things definitely helps me wake up in the morning and tackle the world.
That's great. I love that. Well, I really appreciate you joining us, Anita. This has been a lot of fun. And it sounds like you're growing a great company and looking forward to see what ESS does in the future and the ERP systems. Now with you on the board, I'm excited about you being on the NAC board. Unfortunately, I just left, but it's great that you're on there. And we have some really great things going for NAC. So I'm excited about that. But thanks for being here, Anita, and have a great day.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me. You too.
Thank you for listening to the Elevator Entrepreneur Podcast. I truly hope this information helps my fellow elevator entrepreneurs to build your growth plan so you can free your time, allowing you to rest easy. If you need help getting your elevator business organized for growth, I've created tools and templates inside my favorite business operating system that you can access for free. Plus, you can have a 30-day free trial of the software. Just head over to elevatorstrategichub.com/EBOS. That's /EBOS to get your free access, or you can click the link below. Thanks again. I'll be back next time with a brand new episode on the Elevator Entrepreneur. Until next time, stay safe out there, and I will continue to empower my fellow elevator entrepreneurs.